All right, we are ready to fire up our 4-H Prospect Steer Show. We're going to enter into the ring Class 1. Kyle Taylor from Northwest Rangers is the lone entry in this class.
Welcome back for our 4-H show here this afternoon. We've just got a single entry to kick us off here in our prospect division. I'll tell you what, if there's just going to be one of them, it's a pretty good one to have in there. This is a really nice calf, and I love his balance. I love his proportions. He is so smooth and so good in his body, and just everything blends together so nice from the profile. The steer's got a good shape to him as well. I think as he continues to mature and continues to feed, that one's going to be awfully nice for you on down the road. Good way to get us going here in our Prospect Steer Show. We'll get to see him back for our grand drive here in just a little bit. Congratulations.
Receiving a purple ribbon and coming back for the finals after the last 4-H Prospect Steer is Kyle Taylor from Northwest Rangers. Next, we will welcome in Class 2 of the 4-H Prospect Steers. We have Blake Braun, Liberty Knights, Samantha Funky from Northwest Rangers, and Finn Cushman from Reardon Livestock 4-H. The 4-H and FFA Prospect Steer buckles are sponsored by Dixon Land and Livestock today. I hear we're waiting for a couple steers. I guess I'll take this opportunity to introduce our judge again. Originally from Nevada, Missouri, Spencer Scotton grew up on his family's club calf operation. After high school, he attended Butler Community College, where he was a member of the livestock judging team, and that led him to Kansas State University, where he continued judging and graduated with a degree in animal science. While working on a master's with the swine nutrition group, he assisted with the judging team as a coach at K-State. Spencer is currently the livestock judging coach at Redlands Community College in El Reno, Oklahoma, where the team earned top honors at the 2023 American Royal. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Spencer Scotton. I will also say that this is the 90th annual Junior Livestock Show of Spokane. The title sponsor of the show this year is the Duke and Ruth Fetty Trust and the Robert V. Baker Foundation. Here in the beef ring, our ring sponsor is Ag West Farm Credit. They are an ag lending cooperative with more than a century of experience serving farmers, ranchers, timber harvesters, and aquatic producers throughout the West. They are committed to providing consistent, reliable credit, insurance, and financial services to the people who feed and clothe the world, from Alaska to Arizona. As your trusted source, they'll share knowledge, insights, and financial acumen to help build strong, thriving businesses that last generations. All right, into the ring, Class 2 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show. Blake Braun, Samantha Funky, and Finn Cushman.
Another nice class that we've got out here. Again, some really nice cattle top to bottom here in this particular group. The one that's going to go ahead and start. I really like this steer's design and his look from the side. He's got a really long neck on him. He's really attractive from the side view profile, even though he's not probably overwhelming in regard to his rib and his body. Hopefully, as he continues to mature, he'll continue to bulk up and mass up right through the center portion of his skeleton. But I still think he's got a pretty square shape working down his back and out of his hip. I just hope as that steer continues to mature, he'll continue to just bulk up right through his rib cage and center body, because he's got a really nice look to him, and he's very, very high quality from the side. The steer that's coming out here in second, I think has a good shape to him as well, and he probably has just a shot more depth of flank than the one that goes out right ahead of him. That steer, for me, wants to roll up in his top line and get just a little rounder out of his hip. I'd like to stouten him up in his bone work, but I still thought a little more extension to him and a little more muscle shape whenever he got right in behind him in comparison to the steer that's coming right in behind him. And so whenever you get that calf in motion, like we talked about, you'll see his top line wants to roll up and he gets too round out of his hip, and I would like to change that about him. The steer that we're going to round out our class with, that's a really sound structured kind of a steer that's big in his rib, and he's deep bodied, got a real easy feeding look to him. For me, that steer's just a little plainer in terms of his look and design from the side view profile, especially up front, and I wish he had just a shade more muscle whenever he got right in behind him. But a good class of them there. Congratulations to those exhibitors on a nice job.
Returning for our prospect finals of 4-H directly after our final class, I think it's class 12, will be Samantha Funky and Finn Cushman. Receiving a blue ribbon, Blake Braun. Class 3 of our FFA Prospect Steer Show will now enter the ring. We have Garrett Kane from Lacrosse All-Purpose, Eliza Bailey, Reardon Livestock 4-H, Ava McKay, Frog Hollow, Wyatt Tichnell, Reardon Livestock 4-H, and Weston Axtell, Reardon Livestock 4-H.
Another good class of them that we've got out here, I think as much variation just in terms of type and kind as we've had in any class. And anybody that's been around cattle for a while, you know, as these prospect steers continue to stay on feed and continue to get to probably whatever their target market weight is, there's a lot of things that can go right and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So depending on what happens with these cattle, if everything goes right with all of them, I think we've got a really nice set of steers that we've got out here, but they all are very different in terms of the good that they represent and the types and kinds that they bring to the table. The red steer that's going to go ahead and start off for me, I like this one just fundamentally. Whenever you talk about a steer that's moderate, that's bold-bodied, that has muscle, that's what I like to start off with. Steers that have the right kind of shape, that have the right kind of power, and still combine it with the right kind of look. He's got all of those things. You've done a nice job with that steer, and he is the best one whenever you get up on top of him and get in behind him in terms of his power and his width and his shape. Now, with him, whenever we get him in motion on his rear ankle, we could maybe soften him and loosen him up just a little bit whenever we get him in motion in his structure. But for me, he's got a lot of things that I like to start out with when I'm feeding steers, and just in terms of being a bold, opened up, very, very muscular steer that's got a good look to him at the standstill. I think he does a nice job for us to go ahead and lead us off. The steer that's coming out here in second, this steer, here's some pieces that I like about him. He's very extended. He's really long-bodied. He's very deep-bodied, and he's really flexible in his structure. I like that about him. Now, in comparison to the two cattle that we've got on either side of him, that steer does get just a little plainer up front. He's a little weaker in his top line and a little rounder out of his hip. And so whenever you study him in his balance and his design from the side, we could tweak him just a little bit. But for me, I like his extra body and I like his extra dimension in comparison to the steer that's coming right in behind him. But I didn't think he had enough look to get around the steer that goes out ahead of him. The Blue Roan steer that's coming out here next, he's really sharp in his look from the side. And that steer, if he gets bold and stout and he continues to mature and to keep getting stouter and end up with enough muscle, I think you've got a really nice steer, because I love his look. He's perfect in his top line balance. He's got more attractiveness of design in comparison to the one that goes right out ahead of him. But of our top three, he is the tightest in his heart and his forerib. He's the shallowest bodied steer of the initial trio. That's also the lightest muscled one whenever you get in behind him. So like we talked about, hopefully things go right and he continues to bulk up and continue to get stouter the longer that he stays on feed. The black steer that the young man's got here right in front of me coming out next, my man, you can whip that thing around and line him up right in the middle. This is another one that fundamentally is really good. He's sound in his structure. He's deep in his body type. He's another one that gets a little plain up front and he gets a little plain from behind in regard to his muscle. We need to stouten him up with just a little more look from the side. Same thing with the young lady steer that we're going to round out our class with. This is another extremely long-bodied and extended kind of a steer that gets a little plain in his shape. We need to change him off of his rear leg in terms of his flexibility as well. But a good class of them, a lot of give and take, but all good showmen that all did a nice job with their cattle. Congratulations to them on a competitive class.
Returning to our 4-H prospect finals from Class 3, Garrett Kane and Weston Axtell. Receiving blue ribbons, Ava McKay, Wyatt Tichnell, and Eliza Bailey. Next, we will welcome in Class 4 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show. Adriana Gonzalez from Footloose, Garrett Kane from Lacrosse All Purpose, William Burnett, State Line Stockman, Tommy Gottney, Valley Community 4-H, and Paige Jeske, Liberty Knights 4-H.
Another good class of them that we've got out here. I really like this steer that we're going to go ahead and lead off with. This steer does a good job of combining balance and look from the side. It's got a good shape to him. I think we've got the two steers up in 1 and 2 that probably hit me with just a little more attractiveness in regard to their design and their balance. And I like their lines just a little bit better in comparison to the ones that are coming in behind him. And our class winner, he's just got a little more stoutness to him no matter where that you study him. He's bigger footed. He's stouter in his bone work. He's bolder. He's got a little more dimension down his back and out of his hip. Still combines that with a nice look from the side. Young lady's done a good job with him. I think that's a really solid class winner that we've got. The Brockle face steer that's coming out here in 2, his best look is from the profile. And whenever you study him, he's good in his neck set. He's dead level down his top line. I love the depth and the softness that he's got to his body. And he is very sound structured. A lot of times whenever cattle balance up really good, it's just because they're made right. And he's made right. He's good in his angle of his shoulder, dead level down his top line. He's got an awesome set to his hip and his hind leg. He's not quite as stout as the one that goes out right ahead of him, and so if he wants to get around our class winner, he could probably be just a shade square down his back and out of his hip, but still like that steer. He's got a lot of quality to him. The silver steer that's coming out here next, that's another one that I like some things about. He's got a long neck. He's probably got a little more hip shape in him than the one that goes out right ahead of him, but whenever you step off to the side of him, he just doesn't blend together quite as well. Right in behind his shoulder, he wants to get a little off. He's not quite as good back to his rear rib and flank. We need to change him there, and for as much hip as he's got, he could probably be just a little square coming out of the backside of his shoulder, but done a nice job with your calf. I thought you've had a pair of nice calves back to back in both classes, so congratulations on another really, really competitive one that we've got in here. Just need to change him up from his design and his balance. So young man that's coming out here next, a lot of similarities in this one to the one that goes out in second from the side view profile. Good in his top line, sound in his structure. This steer just needs a little more width and dimension. He doesn't have the same kind of shape up top. We need to stouten him up out of his hip. He almost wants to hook and curl his hind leg up underneath him just a little bit so we can square him up just a little there as well. The young lady that's going to go ahead and round us out, that's not a bad steer. Whenever you talk about a sound steer that's big-bodied, he's big-centered, he's got a very practical look to him. And that steer, whenever you get up on top of him and get in behind him, he's just going to need to mature with some more muscle and some more shape because he gets out-horsed here in the tough class. We need to see him wider built. We need to see him with just a little more muscle. But you've done a great job getting him shown out here because he wouldn't have been real easy to show, but you've done a good job hanging with him. Congratulations again on another very, very competitive class.
Receiving purples and returning from Class 4 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show, Adriana Gonzalez from Footloose and Tommy Gottney from Valley Community. Receiving blue ribbons, Garrett Kane from Lacrosse All Purpose, William Burnett, State Line Stockman, and Paige Jeske from Liberty Knights. Class 5 of our 4-H Prospect Show, we will welcome back William Burnett, from State Line Stockman, True Heaton from Lacrosse All Purpose, Delaney Cox, Columbia County Corrals, Braden Hill, Hog Wild Beef It Up, Casey Kane, Lacrosse All Purpose, Willa McGregor, Lacrosse All Purpose, and Weston Tichnell, Reardon Livestock 4-H.
one of our bigger classes that we've had here in our prospect show, but a really deep class. A lot of good cattle here top to bottom, but still the gold steer that's going to go ahead and lead us off does so pretty quickly. I really like that steer whenever you talk about one that comes in and hits me with a good first impression. He's good in his structure. He's good in his body type. That steer, just whenever you talk about a fundamental good feeding kind of calf, I think he's got all the parts and pieces that he's going to take off and be a really good one for you on down the road. And still, I like his muscle and I like his design and his balance. I just think one that just doesn't have any major holes that needs to go ahead and sort up as just a very complete, high-quality steer that's sound. He's big-bodied, he's muscular, and he's good-looking. Maybe not just the most overwhelming in any one area, but that's okay. Whenever you add everything up, you've got a very, very balanced package to go ahead and lead us off here in this class. The blue roan steer that's coming out here next mirrors our class winner the most closely, and just in terms of stoutness and power and muscle shape. I like his design and his shape and his squareness down his back and out of his hip, where he doesn't have the same kind of running gear as our class winner is. Whenever we get him in motion and his hip and his hind leg isn't as flexible, he doesn't have the same kind of set and travel to his hock and his rear ankle, and he gets just a little plainer up front from a balance standpoint as well. But I did like his body type, and I like his width and his muscle more so than the calf that's going to come out here in third. The steer that's coming out here in third, very striking from the profile. He is neat-necked. He is good where he ties it onto the top of his shoulder, good in his balance and good in his lines. I think that steer, as he continues to mature, we've said this about a lot of them, he's a little greener in terms of his rib and his body, and he continues to mature. He needs to bulk up, and he needs to be just a little stouter, a little bolder, a little wider in terms of his basic build all the way through to complement his look and design from the side, because I do think he's got some quality. He just doesn't have the same kind of shape and muscle as those two cattle that go out ahead of him. The brockle-faced steer that's coming out next, my man, you guys can go ahead and start turning those things around. This steer is big-bodied and he's sound-structured. He's a little plain in his shape, and he gets a bit frail in his bone work. I'd like to stouten him up at the surface. The young lady's Baldy steer that we have coming out next, kind of the same mold of that one. Big-bodied, extended, sound-structured, gets a little off in his top line. He needs just a shade more muscle whenever you get right in behind him. Here's a steer that's got more muscle and stoutness coming out next. He's big-footed. He's rugged in his bone work. That steer's got more muscle than the two that go out ahead of him. The young lady's here in the pink shirt does. Where I'd like to change him is his front end structure, and especially whenever you get right in front of him and study that guy on the profile, he'll want to come over in his knee just a little bit too much for me. We need to change him there, give him a shot more flank to balance his lower body out just right. The young man that's going to round us out, another one, big outline, very extended, a calf that looks like he's going to have some grow and some performance to him. Whoop, let him go. We just need to see a little more dimension and a little more muscle in him. Congratulations again, another good class.
Class 5 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show. We will have 2 returning to the finals. Delaney Cox from Columbia County and True Heaton from La Crosse All-Purpose. Receiving blue ribbons, Weston Tichnell, Reardon Livestock, William Barnett, State Line Stockman, then Weston Tichnell, Reardon Livestock, Willa McGregor, La Crosse All-Purpose, and Casey Kane, La Crosse All-Purpose, and Braden Hill, Hog Wild, Beef It Up. Class 6 of the 4-H Prospect Steer Show. Into the ring, we have Bennett Rep, St. John Endicott, Judson Hall, Columbia County Corrals, Carter DeBolt, Colfax Grow 'em and Show 'em, Kyle Taylor, Northwest Rangers.
Well, we're going to have a really, really nice drive here in just a little bit whenever we get all of our class winners and reserves back out here for our champion drive, because we've got another first and second out here in this class that are both really nice. I really like our class winner. That's another one whenever you talk about a balanced, good-looking one that's good in his lines, that's incredibly good in his rib and body, and then whenever you get off to a three-quarter or get up on top of these cattle, very impressive in his shape that he's got coming out of the backside of his shoulder. He's got a big, stout, square hip in him. I love his lower body balance, and to combine it with that kind of look at the standstill like he does, that is a really nice silhouette. Great lines, great picture right there. I think that one will be really competitive whenever we bring him back here in just a little bit. The steer that's coming out here in second, I like this one's stoutness. He's very rugged and big in his foot. He's stout in his bone work. That steer's got muscle. He's got dimension. He's got mass whenever you get right up on top of him and get him behind him. Whenever you compare him to our class winner, not quite as neat in his look. He's not quite as fresh in terms of his lines, and just his general side view profile isn't as attractive as the one that we lead off with. Here's one that's got muscle coming out here in three. He's got a square back and a big hip. I like his extension. I like his length of body. He doesn't have as much depth and softness and sweep back through his rear rib and flank. Whenever we get him in motion, he's got just a little bit of an attitude to him, and so he's not wanting to relax out here, but he's still just a little rigid in the way that he sets him down from behind. Hopefully that's an attitude thing, and whenever he continues to kind of calm down, he'll get just a little more relaxed in his structure. But today he's a little tight and he's a little rigid. The one that we're going to round out with, that's another one, extremely long-bodied, and this deer's actually got some muscle shape whenever you get on top of him. There's no doubt about that. For me, we need to see him better in his body type. He's a little hard and a little tight in his heart. He gets a little shallow and a little hard back to his flank as well. Whenever you watch him go off his hind leg, just his coordination of it maybe isn't quite perfect, and we'd like to see him just a little more athletic in his structure. But again, congratulations, another nice class, especially up on the top end, all the way through, really. Congratulations to him.
Class 6, returning to our 4-H prospect finals, Kyle Taylor, Northwest Rangers, and Carter DeBolt, Colfax Grow 'em and Show 'em. Receiving blue ribbons, Judson Hall from Columbia County and Bennett Rep from St. John Endicott. Class 7 of our 4-H prospect steer show. We're going to welcome Ellison Hall from Columbia County, Charlie Casey, Farm Heaven, Casey Kane, Lacrosse All Purpose, Eli Cobbs, Liberty Knights, Grady Atkins, Bonner County, and Caden Axtell, Reardon Livestock 4-H.
We've got another very, very competitive class that we've got out here, top to bottom, some really nice cattle, and yet our initial trio of them that we've got out here, I think, sort up, do so pretty quickly, and yet they fall in line pretty comfortably for me. I like our class winner, again, just a combination of look and design and build with the right kind of shape and the right kind of dimension. We definitely have the two stoutest steers coming out in 1 and 2, and what I like about our class winner, he's more extended up front. Whenever you get these cattle in motion, he's more appropriate in the set and travel and more attractive in the set of his hind leg as well to go ahead and lead us off. So again, we've got the two stout power cattle that have more feature, that have more bone, that have more foot size coming out in 1 and 2. Our class winner, he's better in his look up front. He's better in the design of his hip and his hind leg. The Baldy steer coming out next might be the stoutest one that we've got out here. He's actually better whenever he comes into his heart and his forerib. The turn of his center body is extremely good. He's got a big stout hip in him whenever you get in behind him. And yet, for me, I'd like to square him up out of his hip. He gets a bit shorter, a bit rounder out of his hip. You can see it on the stand, but especially whenever we get him in motion, he'll really duck his pins and want to shove his hind leg outside of himself. We need to change him up there to go ahead and flop that pair and get him around our class winner. But there's a lot of calf there to get around. We need to change his structure, but I still thought just stoutness and power allowed him to stay over the ones that we've got coming behind him. The red steer that we've got coming out next, extremely sound, very big bodied, very, very practical kind of a steer. I love that about him. I love that kind. With that, though, whenever we get to comparing him into comparison with the ones that go out in 1 and 2, there's not near as much shape. There's not near as much expression down his back, out of his hip. He doesn't have the same kind of foot size and stoutness of bone work as those two cattle. So as much as I like his kind, he's giving up way, way too much horsepower to get around the initial pair of them. Here's a steer coming out next. Young lady, you can go ahead and bring that one around, and we can circle these right down the middle of the ring. And I like that one's look. I like his extension. I like his design. We just need to see a bit more to him in his rib and his center body. He gets a little tight and pinched in his heart and his forerib all the way back into his flank. We need to drop him and see him just a little softer and a little bolder with more dimension all the way through that steer, but especially in his rib cage because he's got a really good look to him. We just need to see him a little stouter. Here's one that I like his rib and his body just a bit better, that's going to round us out and probably has a little more muscle, honestly, than the steer that goes out right ahead of him. Just his balance from the side, and I think a lot of that has to do with his top line and his hip design. You can just see he just doesn't balance up quite good enough. He gets off behind his shoulder, rolls up in his top. He's got too much roundness out of his hip, and so just from a design standpoint is where we need to change him to work him up a spot or two. Good class of them again. Congratulations to those exhibitors on a nice job.
Class 7, we will have 2 exhibitors returning to the 4-H Prospect Finals. They are Charlie Casey from Farm Heaven 4-H and Grady Atkins from Bonner County. The blue ribbons in that class, Eli Cobbs, Ellison Hall, and Casey Kane. Coming in for Class 8 of the 4-H Prospect Show, Braden Hill from Hog Wild Beef It Up, Mac Healy from Valley Community 4-H, Kinsley Williams, Bonner County, Natalie Gutierrez, Footloose, and Claire Vantine from Colfax, Grow 'em and Show 'em.
Got another good class out here, but probably one of the more challenging classes to put together. There's not one in here that looks like the other one, and each one of them, there's one thing that I really, really like something about, and maybe the one right behind them complements them in an area, and something that you'd like to change. They each one of them have a little issue as well. So I think this class becomes pretty challenging to put together, and there's honestly not a huge margin of difference between all 5 of these cattle out here. We don't have a bad one in the lot, I promise you that. The gold steer, though, for me, is the boldest, the stoutest, and the most muscular, and I really like his extra dimension, especially whenever you study him right through the center part of his body. Whenever you get in behind these cattle, he's pretty overwhelming out here just in regard to his width and boldness and shape and muscularity. We could maybe tweak him in his structure just a little bit, but you could maybe argue tweaking all of them just a little bit in their structure. And so whenever that becomes a little more of a wash, and that one is so overwhelming and so dominant in his muscle and his shape, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use him to win. Now, the one that's coming out here in second, standing still, I think rivals our class winner because he is extended up front. He's a little smoother there in the lay of his shoulder. Very, very nicely presented steer that this young lady's done a great job getting shown. For me, we get him in motion, and he's probably the shortest stepping and the shortest strided one in class, and he gets a little too rigid, especially off of his rear too. We need to loosen him up in his hock and his rear ankle, but I still thought there was enough good in that steer. I thought he mirrored our class winner's rib and body type and dimension a bit more than the steer that's coming out in third, but whenever we get him in motion, like we talked about, he's probably the shortest strided one that we have in the entire class. The young lady steer here that's in third, he was a tough one for me to know what to do with because there's pieces about this steer that I absolutely like the best. He's very extended, really, really long up front. I think that steer's got a striking look to him from the profile, and he's still got some shape and dimension down his back and out of his hip. Of our top 3, he's the shallowest bodied steer. Whenever we get him in motion, he gets too rigid in his rear ankle, and he never sets down quite good enough in his rear pastern. So there's a few things in him that we'd like to change as well. But I think if everything goes right for that steer, he'll be a really nice one on down the road. The snip nose steer coming out next, he's sounder in his structure than probably those couple cattle that go out right ahead of him. He's got a really nice hind leg, and I love his depth of body. He's the plainest fronted one that we have of the initial 4, and then whenever you get in behind him or on top of him, he's also the lightest muscled and the flattest one whenever you study him amongst the 3 that go out right in front of him. So as much as I like his body and as much as I like his structure, he gives up too much look and too much muscularity. Here's one that is just a shot stouter in his shape and his muscle, and I like him whenever you get in behind him. He's got a big turn right there through the center and lower part of his quarter, so that steer for me is not hurting for muscle. He's not hurting for rib and body. He gets too round out of his hip, frail in his bone work, and his balance isn't quite good enough from the side. So I thought an interesting class to put together, very challenging for me because all of those steers had some really good parts and pieces to them. Maybe just none of them maybe just fit together quite perfect, but good class of them though nonetheless. Congratulations to those exhibitors on a nice job.
Returning to the 4-H Prospect Finals from Class 8, we have Kinsley Williams and Claire Van Tyne. Receiving blue ribbons in that class, Natalie Gutierrez, Braden Hill, and Mac Hilly. We're going to welcome Class 9 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show into the ring. We have Aubrey Kniveton from Footloose, Range Heaton from Lacrosse All Purpose, Everett Bailey from Reardon Livestock, Kelly Cordill, Frog Hollow, and Julian Gonzalez from Footloose 4-H.
Well, I took a little more time on our initial pair of cattle that we've got out here, and I think they're both very good. Subtle differences between the pair of them, but at the end of the day, they're both really nice cattle. I like our class winner whenever you start him at the ground. He's big-footed. He's stout in his bone work. I think he's a bit better in his structure and his angles than the steer that's coming right in behind him. He's more correct in the set of his shoulder. He's better in the set of his knee whenever you study him up front. And I still think whenever you get these cattle in motion, he's more appropriate in the set and travel of his hip and his hind leg with just a little more stoutness and substance of bone work as well. And also what I like about him, whenever you get up on top of these cattle, not only is he better in his build, whenever you get up on top of him, he's bolder in his body. He comes square behind his shoulder, and he's a little bit stouter out of his hips. So he's got the advantage in structure. He's got the advantage in stoutness in terms of his bone work, and he's got the advantage in his shape and his muscularity and dimension as well to go ahead and lead us out. Now, the one that's coming in second, he's got a very striking look from the side, and that steer is not plain whenever you get off to the profile. He's longer necked. He's more extended whenever you step off to the side of him. I love his look, and I love his presence up front. That steer's got really good lines, and you do a heck of a job getting him shown and presented out here. He's not blessed with the best hair coat, and so whenever he doesn't blend quite well enough from his shoulder into his forerib anyway, and then he's a little thin-haired to go on top of that, that just further emphasizes the fact that he's not as good in his rib shape right in behind his shoulder. Study him in his structure. He's a little too upright in his shoulder, a little forward in his knee. We get him in motion. He's a bit more rigid from behind, so whenever you study him in terms of his build and design, you can start picking a few more holes in him. That's why he's going to end up here in second, but I still think nice steer that's going to go ahead and come out here in two. The 1 in 3 coming out, I like some pieces about this steer. He's moderate, he's big-bodied, he's got dimension, and I like his muscle shape and tone. Whenever you study him up front, not as attractive as that calf that goes out right ahead of him. There we go. He's not as attractive up front as that steer that goes out ahead of him. And then whenever we set him in motion, his hind leg gets a little rigid and uncoordinated as well. The young man steer that's over there in the corner, sound structured, big-bodied, smooth-made steer that needs just a shot more muscle and real shape to him up top. And then the steer that we're going to round out our class with, a long neck steer that's got some stoutness of bone work. He just needs a little more rib and body and substance whenever you get in behind him. That steer's not quite as stout out of his hip in relation to the ones that are up the line. Congratulations again. That was a nice class of them there. Depth of quality was very, very good. So let's commend those exhibitors. Put your hands together for them as they work their way out. Thank you.
Earning purple ribbons and returning to the finals from Class 9, Aubrey Niveton and Julian Gonzalez. Blue ribbons, Kelly Cordill, Everett Bailey, and Range Heaton. We're going to welcome Class 10 of our 4-H Prospect Steer Show into the ring. We have Elliot Keys, Landon Williams, Tommy Joe Jensen, Mickey Hilly, and Larissa Lippert.
Well, as we're getting these lined up, I think another really, really good class and a fun class to work through. The black and white steer that's going to go ahead and start us off. Probably the worst thing about this steer is his attitude, and I don't envy you showing him, because I'm telling you what, that steer would be hard to get a handle on. But he is very nice, and you talk about a bold-bodied and stout, muscular, awesome shape kind of a steer that's got a really neat look to him from the profile whenever he wants to show off. I think he's pretty impressive in the kind of shape that he's got with the kind of look that he's got from the side. We could maybe change him up in his structure just a little. He is a little straight fronted, and we could maybe tuck him back just a little in his knee ever so slightly and square him up on his front feet. But I still think that steer, very high quality. Love his boldness, love his shape, and whenever he wants to cooperate, he is very, very good looking as well. The red steer that's coming out next, he has got a huge rib and a huge center body laid in him. I think he's stouter than the steer that's coming right in behind him. Whenever you get in behind this lineup, he's a little plainer up front, doesn't hook up quite as square behind his shoulder as our class winner. That's why he's going to run into second. The one that's coming out here in 3 actually hooks up better behind his shoulder over his rib than the steer that goes out right ahead of him, but he does fade a bit from behind. He's not as stout out of his hip, especially through the center and the lower part of his quarter. Not as impressive as those 2 cattle that go out ahead of him, and then he's not as big in his rib and his center body either. So again, just a few little things that are going to keep him in third. The red steer that's coming out next, he's really practical. There's nothing fundamentally that's wrong with this steer because he's big-bodied and he's sound and he's got enough muscle. With that, though, I just wish there was a few extra dynamic pieces that we could latch on to where he stood out just a little bit more, because he is just a little plainer in his look up front. He's a little bit frailer in his bone work and not as impressive in his shape from behind as some of those cattle, especially that go out in 1 and 2. And whenever we get him in motion, he's just a little cumbersome off of his rear skeleton, and we need to see him just get out and go with a little more flexibility. So I think there's some fundamental things about that steer that are pretty solid, but maybe just not those extra pieces like we see in those ones up the line. The black and white painted up steer that we're going to round out our class with, again, extension is very good and length of body is very good in this steer. His stoutness of structure is definitely above average as well. We need to change him in his body type. We need to change him in his top line balance. He gets off behind his shoulder too round out of his hip, and whenever you study him, he wants to cut up to his flank, and it just throws his balance off too much from the side. Good class of them again. Congratulations to those exhibitors on a nice job.
Returning to the 4-H prospect finals from Class 10, Landon Williams from Ritzville Livestock, Mickey Hilly from Valley Community. Receiving blue ribbons, Larissa Lippert, then Elliott Keys, and Tommy Joe Jensen. We'll now welcome in Class 11, Eiley Fitzner, West Plains Rangers, Avery Deeds, Northwest Rangers, Chloe Weisler, Farm Heaven, and Kaylee Eider, Kootenai County Showman.
Another really good class of steers that we've got out here, quality top to bottom, really 4 steers that we've got out here, really some good pieces in all of them, and yet I'm pretty comfortable with how they fall in line. A good top pair that we've got out here, the black steer that's going to go ahead and lead us off, very striking in his look from the side. I love his balance and I love his freshness. He's got just a bit more shape in him than the steer that's coming right in behind him, especially whenever you study him coming out of the back of his shoulder. He's bolder, he's better in terms of the boldness of his rib, the squareness that he's got over his rib, all the way out of a stouter hip. Whenever you get in behind him, a steer that's got a little more stoutness of bone, a little more feature to him as well, and I love his look and design from the profile. Now, he does get just a nickel rounder out of his hip, and he doesn't sit down with the most comfort in his rear ankle, but still, I think that steer pretty comfortably needs to go ahead and sort up here in this class. Now, the steer that's coming out here in second, there's some really good things about him as well. That is a big-bodied steer that's very extended up front. Whenever you get up on top of him, though, he doesn't have the same kind of shape and squareness coming out of the backside of his shoulder. He's kind of shucking his hair just a little bit too, and so doesn't have that just real fresh square shape up top. Whenever we get him in motion, he wants to duck his pins and wants to hook it, kind of pull his hock and shuffle his hind leg just a little bit as well, and he doesn't have the same kind of stoutness of bone work either as that one that we lead off with, but a very, very high quality pair of steers that we have here in this class. The red and white steer that's coming out next, big-bodied steer, good in his top line balance. That steer's just a little too jammed up and a little too plain up front, and whenever you study him from the profile, he needs just a shot more balance to him. The one that we're going to round out our class with, incredibly heavy muscled. He is wide, he's bold, he is very, very stout from behind. With all that, he just doesn't keep his structure in check quite good enough, especially from behind. You study him and the design of his hip and his hind leg, we need to see him just a little bit sounder, but you've done a good job with him. That steer's extra stout. We need to see him just a little sounder to go ahead and work up a spot or two. Congratulations again. Very, very nice class.
From our Class 11 of the 4-H Prospect Steers, receiving purples and coming back, Kaylee Eider and Avery Deeds. Receiving blue ribbons, we have Ailey Fitzner and Chloe Weisler. Now, we're going to bring in the ring Class 12. There are 3 showmen here. Emmett Profit from Buckles and Bling, Braden Duckin, Bonner County, and Cammie Williams, Bonner County.
as we're getting into these heavier weights, we've still got some really, really nice cattle, especially up on the top end. This calf that wins this class, this is a really good steer. I love his balance. I love his build. I think that's an awesome bodied steer that whenever you talk about the right kind of fundamentals as far as structure, stoutness of bonework, body type, muscularity, he fits that very, very well. He's very sound in his structure, and he's got a nice look to him from the side. There's your look at him just in terms of his balance and his profile. Everything fits together very nicely. Maybe not overwhelming in just one area, but again, very, very solid and balanced steer to go ahead and start us off with. 2 and 3 get just a little closer. They're a little different. I like the look of the painted up steer, and his levelness aligns a bit better than the one that's coming in behind him. I wish he had just a shot more muscle, because of the 3, he could use just a little more turn of his body, and he's the lightest muscled steer that we've got in the class. And so if we could bulk him up just a little bit, he would probably push our class winner just a bit harder than he already does. But he does come off just a little bit harder body, not quite as bold and dimensional. Here's a steer that's got more muscle that's going to round us out. He's bold down his back. He's got a great shape out of his hip. He's just not built quite good enough. Whenever you study him in his top line, he wants to roll up in his top. He wants to get too round out of his hip. He needs just a shot more bone work as well. But again, a good class of them there. 3 deep. We've got quality cattle. Congratulations on a nice job.
All right. Returning from Class 12, our final 4-H prospect steer class, Cammie Williams and Braden Duckin, receiving a blue Emmett Prophet. Before we bring the prospects the prospect steer finals back in, does everybody here know Sharon Hannes? I was told that it is her birthday today. How about you join me in singing happy birthday to Sharon Hannes? You guys know this show doesn't run without her. You ready? Happy birthday. Good job, people, just like we practiced it. All right, 4-H prospect finals. We are going to bring into the ring all of the class winners first, followed by the steers that were second in class. So coming into the ring in this order are our class winners. We have Kyle Taylor, Samantha Funky, Garrett Kane, here we go. Kyle Taylor, Samantha Funky, here he comes, Garrett Kane, Adriana Gonzalez, Delaney Cox, Kyle Taylor, Charlie Casey, Kinsley Williams, Aubrey Niveton, Landon Williams, Kaylee Eider, and the final class winner, Cammie Williams. Seconds, come on in the ring, please. Second places as they come in the ring will be Finn Cushman, Weston Axtell, Tommy Gottney, True Heaton, Carter DeBolt, Grady Atkins, Claire Vantine, Julian Gonzalez, Mickey Hilly, Avery Deeds, and Braden Duckin.
We've had a really, really competitive prospect show here in our 4-H division. We've got a lot of class winners and a lot of seconds that we bring out here, and hopefully I did a good enough job talking them in each particular class. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them again like I have been, but we dang sure have a very, very high quality set of class winners that we've got out here, and I think it was about halfway through that I mentioned, man, this drive is going to be wicked good, and we were just about halfway done, and so we even had a lot more good ones coming in after that class that I mentioned that. And this lineup of class winners out here is very, very impressive. And obviously we've got a lot of spread in weight and maturity from class 1 to class 11 or 12, however many we had. And so that's one thing that I'm just kind of weighing out in my mind. And there's a lot of difference and a lot of spread from one end to the other. We've got cattle that are a long ways away from their end point to ones that are ready to rock and roll that are over 1,400 right now. So we've got a great set of class winners, a really, really good set of seconds that we've got over here backing them up. I know I took a little extra time kind of looking through these, but I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable in what I was doing because there's a trio of them out here that I think are all very close and are all very, very good. But before we get into that and before we name our top 5 out here, if you would around ringside, let's congratulate all of our exhibitors that made it out here. We'll take nothing away from our other class winners that I'm not going to talk about, but just in the essence of time, I'm going to highlight 3 of them that are in contention in my mind and kind of some of the things that I'm kicking around out here. Our first one that's in contention is this calf that's right here in front of me that the young man in the cowboy hat's got circling around. Whenever this steer came in, I thought he'd be pretty tough to turn here in this prospect division because I love his look and I love his combination of design from the side with the kind of rib, with the kind of body type that he's got. There's your look at him right there. That is one attractive show calf whenever you get off to the side of him, and whenever you look down the lineup, he really, really sticks out to me because his lines and his proportions are very impressive, and we talked about in him for the kind of look that he's got. Get up on top of him, the turn of his body, the boldness of his rib is exceptional. He's stout out of his hip. He's got bone. He's got feature. I like him all the way to the ground. I think that's the one that just whenever you talk about projecting one out, if he can look like that at 1350 to 1450, man, he's going to be in the hunt. That's a gamer right there if everything goes right. I know he's got a long time to go until he hits that, but if I were you, I'd be really excited if I had a calf like that. I think he's very, very high quality. The other 2 that are in contention, in my mind, like I said, take nothing away from our other class winners because I think we had an awesome, awesome set of them out here. Just wanted to let you know, let you guys know around ringside what I'm thinking. The young lady right here that's circling around, that's another one that comes in strong contention to me because that is another one very, very high quality steer. Love his look, love his profile from the side, extremely fresh and good in his hair coat and his presentation. This young lady does a good job getting 110% out of this steer. Great look, great shape, love his width, love his dimension. Of the 3 that I've got in contention in my mind, he's probably the one that sets down the most rigid from behind in his rear ankle, and I'd like to lengthen him out of his hip like we talked about in class. But he's got some outlying pieces because his look is incredibly good up front, and I love his shape and I love his squareness. The other one that's in contention is this black and white steer that, again, is at the end of the line. This one's probably the furthest along, and he's ready. He's over 1,400. He is at an appropriate and acceptable market weight, and, man, there's no guesswork in that one. He's got there, and that is a rock-solid steer. From the ground up, he's about as good as any of them out here in terms of his structure. He's big-footed. He's stout in his bone work. He's clean in his joint work. He's very fluid in motion, and I love that calf whenever we get him on the lead. I love his rib and his body type. He's sure got enough muscle to go along with it. He's probably not as overwhelming whenever you get right up on top of him, right out of the backside of his shoulder in relation to his weight in comparison to those other 2 that we just talked about. But, again, that one is just rock solid. There's not very many places where you say, hey, that calf's just not good. I don't think there's anywhere where you can say that about him. Now, you can say there's some places where he's not as good, not as overwhelming as those other 2 calves that we talked about. He's just a little slicker haired, and whenever you back off to the side of him, he's probably the plainest one of those 3 that I talked about, especially up front. He's getting a little more mature about his head and his neck and his crest, and whenever you back off to the side of him, he becomes just a little more ordinary looking of the trio that we've talked about. So there's some give and take, and there's some really, really good discussion that you can have amongst these cattle out here. And hey, you get somebody different out here sorting them, you could have a different top 5, and I'd be completely fine with that, because that's the kind of quality and the depth that we're working with out here. So I want to congratulate all of you young people on bringing a heck of a set of cattle out here today. Those were just my thoughts, and that's kind of what I thought about the top end and kind of what was going through my mind. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm going to go ahead and set this down. We'll select a top 5 here in this division. One more time, if you would, let's congratulate all our exhibitors that made it out of some pretty deep water here in this division lineup.
Grand champion, 4-H prospect steer, Kyle Taylor. Sorry I was late on that. Reserve champion, 4-H prospect steer, Kaylee Eider. Kaylee Eider. Third overall, Cammie Williams. Fourth overall, Kyle Taylor. And fifth overall, Adriana Gonzalez. We will now take pictures of the top 5 4-H prospect steers. The rest of you are excused. We'll follow up with the first class of 4-H market steers. Coming into the ring is 4-H Market Beef Class 1. We have Caden Axtell, Reardon Livestock with a steer weighing 1,100 pounds. Garrick Olson, Frog Hollow, steer weighing 1,132. Adrian McMahon, GQs, 1155. Looks like we have another Caden Axtell, Reardon Livestock, 1170. Colin Hames, Garfield County, 1176. And Cade Meacham, Footloose, 1179. I'll take this opportunity to announce that our 4-H Market Steer Buckle sponsors are Zach and Bailey St. John in memory of Dave St. John.
Nice class to kick us off here in our market steer show in our 4-H division. I think we've got a pair of steers that are up towards the top end of this class that are both moderate. They're bold-bodied. I think these are the two most muscular steers that we have in here. The young man's red steer that's going to go ahead and lead us off, I think, combines that with just a little more of everything. He's bigger-footed. He's stouter in his bone work. He's got a square and more attractive hind leg underneath him than the one that's coming in behind him. You get up on top of him, I do think he is the most impressive one in regard to his shape down his back, the stoutness out of his hip, his stoutness of foot and bone work with the right kind of body type to go along with that as well. The one that's coming out here in second, I think he's the one that ranks as the next most powerful one in here. He's got an awesome turn of his body. I love the turn and shape that he's got through the center and lower part of his quarter. Whenever you study him in comparison to our class winner, he does get just a shade rounder out of his hip. He doesn't have the same kind of stoutness of bone work, and whenever we get him in motion, his hind leg isn't as attractive in the way that he sets it down as the one that we lead off with. The steer that's coming out next, the young lady's got, you guys can go ahead and start bringing those around, and we'll line them up right here in the middle. This is a really attractive steer from the side. I actually like his hip and his hind leg design better than the one that goes out ahead of him, and he's really got a pretty good shape down his top. He wants to fade just a little bit and taper to his hip, and he needs to be stouter from behind because he does get just a little too flat as you study him right through the center and lower part of his quarter. But I thought the mid portion of his body, his turn of rib, and his shape coming out of the backside of his shoulder was enough to go ahead and get him around the gray steer that's coming out next. The gray steer that's coming out next, long-bodied, really extended, like his stoutness of bone work, gives up a little rib and center body and just depth and dimension right there. And whenever you go get your hands on him, he's just a little plainer to the touch. He's a little plainer and more nondescript in his muscle shape, and we need to see him square down his back with just a bit bigger rib cage laid in him to go ahead and work him up a spot or two. The black steer that's coming next, he's moderate, he's big-bodied, he's sound, he's easy feeding, he's a little plain in his look and a bit too plain in his shape of muscle down his back and especially from behind. And then the red steer that we're going to round out with, that's another one who I really like his length of body and I like his extension. We just need to see more muscle in that guy. He gets too bland down his back. He wants to narrow up from behind. We need to stouten him up and, again, probably see just a shot more real rib and body in him to go along with it. Good way to get us going here in our Market Steer Show on the 4-H side. Congratulations to a good Class 1.
From Class 1 of our 4-H Market Beef Show, returning to the finals with a purple ribbon, Colin Hames and Cade Meacham. Blue ribbons in this class were Adrian McMahon, Caden Axtell, and Garrick Olson. Class 2 will welcome into the ring Cade Meacham from Footloose with a steer weighing 1183. Kane Geddes, Footloose, steer is 1197. Ember Fitzner, West Plains Rangers, steer weighing 1198. Emily Blickenstaff, Blue Ribbon, steer weighing 1206. And Hadley Hames, Garfield County Livestock, steer weighing 1220.
Got another really, really nice class of steers that we've got out here. A lot of quality, especially up on the top end. The gray steer that's going to go ahead and start us off, that steer is very powerful. I love his muscle shape, and whenever you get up on top of these cattle, he's very impressive. He's got a big square top in him. He's really stout out of his hip. I like his extra stoutness of bone work. He's got more rib and body and just more punch and dimension through the center portion of him than the one coming right in behind him. So for me, he's just pretty overwhelming in here. His stoutness and mass and handle quality and muscularity is very, very impressive. The red steer that's coming out here in second, I thought some good give and take between 2 and 3, a pair of red steers that are both really good. I love this one's extension. I love his look up front. He hooks up with a very, very strong shape behind his shoulder. He's really square right there over his rib, stout out of his hip. I prefer his hind leg and rear ankle in comparison to the one that's coming right in behind him. Now, he needs to be a little softer in his heart and his forerib, and we could drop him in his flank just a little bit to balance him out just right from the side to be more competitive with our class winner, but that's still a really, really nice steer that's going to go ahead and roll out in second. The steer coming out in third, I love this steer standing still. He's moderate. He is awesome bodied. I like his rib cage. I like his center body, and I like his dimension as good as anything that we've got out here. Probably my biggest problem with this steer is there's one thing. He gets a little plain up front, but probably the biggest thing for me, whenever we get him in motion, he wants to just snap his ankle every time, and he's really rigid and he's really restricted there at the ground in his rear pastern. If we could keep him from doing that, I think he easily probably gets up a spot, maybe even 2 spots higher, and pushes our class winner just a little bit more because I love that steer, everything but his hind leg and his rear ankle. I really, really like that steer. The one that's coming out next, his moderation, his body type, real easy feed and look to him, very sound in his structure. That steer of the top end that we've got out here, he became the one that was the plainest in his shape, especially down his top, out of his hip. He's not quite as aggressive. He's not quite as square over his rib and loin, but fundamentally, that's still another nice calf. And then the young lady that's going to round us out, that's a nice steer that's long-bodied, extended, very, very sound. That's still a practical, good feeding kind of steer. Here in a tough class, though, gets a little flat, a little plain muscle, a little frailer in his bone work, but she's done a good job hanging with him the whole time. Congratulations to her, and congratulations on a nice class.
Class 2 receiving purple ribbons and coming back to the 4-H market finals will be Emily Blickenstaff and Kane Geddes. Receiving blue ribbons, Hadley Hames, Cade Meacham, and Ember Fitzner. Entering the ring for Class 3 of our 4-H market show, we have Bennett Rep, St. John Endicott, steer weighing 1241. Hadley Hames, Garfield County, steer weighing 1241. Reese Soliday, Reardon Livestock, steer weighing 1241. Ava McKay, Frog Hollow, steer weighing 1241. Lila Young, Garfield County Livestock, steer weighing 1243. And Charlie Stallcop, Garfield County Livestock, market heifer, weighing 1252.
I think another good class to work through that we've got out here, our lone market heifer is going to be our class winner. And again, I think that one for me really does a nice job of combining moderate, big-bodied, practical, easy feed and look with the kind of muscle and shape that I really like. And whenever you get up on top of her, that heifer is actually the boldest one out of the back of her shoulder and the stoutest one out of her hip of our lineup out here. And for me, she does a good job. And these cattle are maybe still just a shade off from being just an ideal, what you'd maybe call an ideal market weight, what we're killing cattle today. But still, she's very appropriate in regard to her finish. She's probably the most appropriate of our lineup that we've got out here. She's got a good uniformity of finish over her rib, and I think she does a nice job of combining that with the right kind of muscle, the right kind of look. And I do like her structure better than the one that's coming right in behind her as well. The steer that's coming out here in 2 really mirrors the same kind of type and kind that we got in our class winner. Big-bodied, moderate, practical, easy feeding type of a steer. Love that about him. Maybe not quite as aggressive in his shape up high, not as stout in his bone work, and whenever we get him in motion, he's not as flexible in his hock and his rear ankle in comparison to our class winner. But I did think his body type and added dimension was allowed him to get over the one that's coming out here in 3. The one that's coming in 3, that's a big extended steer that's very long-bodied, really extended up front. Got a good shape to him up top. He's got a good turn coming out of the back of his shoulder. For me, I'd like to moderate him just a little bit in his frame size in relation to his body because he gets just a little hard right there in his heart, and he's a bit shallower to his flank than the 2 cattle that go out right ahead of him. So whenever you back off to the side of him, that steer doesn't balance out quite as good because he is a little taller and he's a little harder bodied in comparison to those 2 cattle that are above him. The red steer that's coming out next, you can go ahead and start whipping those around. This red steer does have more rib. He does have more depth of body. I really like that about him. We need to change his top line balance just a shade. He wants to roll up in the center of his spine. He doesn't hook up quite as strong behind his shoulder. Of our initial 4 of them that we've got, he is the flattest one out of his hip from behind, so we just need to amp him up and give him just a shot more shape as well. Here's a big-bodied, very easy feeding kind of a steer, and probably other than our class winner, probably the one that's the closest to 12 o'clock in terms of degree of cover. He's got a really nice shape to him whenever in uniformity of finish whenever you go in and get your hands on him. Although his fat cover is really good, his muscle shape's just not quite as good. Coming right out of the back of his shoulder, that steer's just a little jammed up front and a bit too plain to go along with that as well. The baldy steer that we're going to round out our class with, extension's good, length is good, structure is sound, and I like how he can get out and move and motor. He wants to get just a little too tight in his body, and we need to see more muscularity and stoutness in him to go ahead and work him up the line. Good class of them there. Congratulations to those exhibitors on a nice job.
Class 3 of our 4-H market show, receiving purple and returning to finals. First, Charlie Stallkop, who is also going to receive a buckle as our 4-H market heifer champion, which was sponsored by Basin Farm and Feed. Also returning to the finals, Reese Soliday. Blue ribbons, Ava McKay, Lila Young, Hadley Hames, and Bennett Rep. Coming into the ring, Class 4, we have Charlie Stallkop, Garfield County, 1256. Lucas Klein, Liberty Knights, 1268. Quinn Falwell, Boundary Beef, 1271. Trayton Kimball, Country Kids 4-H, Pomeroy, 1279. Lucas Klein, Liberty Knights, 1285. And Maggie Olson, Frog Hollow, 1288. I'll also take the opportunity to announce that, or remind that this is the 90th annual Junior Livestock Show. The title sponsor for the show this year is the Duke and Ruth Fetty Trust and Robert V. Baker Foundation. Also here in the beef ring, our ring sponsor is Ag West Farm Credit.
Got another good class again. Quality. Yep, you go ahead and just pull in right behind the black one. A lot of good pieces that we've got up here on our top end for sure. Just the one that adds up the most for me is the young lady's black steer. I think this one of the two that up front that are just a little bit nicer built and a little bit better in their balance and their design. I like this one's rib. I like his body, and he is very nice built. Whenever we get him in motion, he is great structured. He can get out and go very, very comfortable at the ground and does so with just a little more rib and body and substance than the one that's coming right in behind him. That's just a really fundamentally fault-free calf to go ahead and lead us off. I thought 2 and 3, there was some discussion there. Both these calves are good. I like the extension and I like the length of body in this steer that's coming out here in second. And he's one that's just a little stronger in his top line, and that allows him to balance out just a bit better from the profile. Now, he's not quite as stout in his bone work, and he doesn't have as much just rib and dimension as that one that we lead off with, and that's why he's going to land in second. But again, I think he has the advantage in balance and side view profile in comparison to the red brockle face steer coming out next. The red brockle face steer coming out next, he's a little more moderate in his frame. You can argue that he's got just a shade more depth of body. I wouldn't argue with you there at all. For me, we need to change him in his balance from the side. He gets a little too off in his top line. He gets too round out of his hip. He needs a shot more bone work all the way to the surface, so those things just throw him off whenever you get off to the side of him. The red baldy steer coming next, very sound and big-bodied, and he's got a real practical, easy feed and fast steer look to him. For me, a steer that's a little plainer in his look, and he's a little plainer in his muscle shape whenever you go in and get your hands on him. I'd like to see him just a little more expressive and a bit more descript down his top and out of his hip. The young lady's brockle face steer that's coming out next, kind of the same make and model of the one that goes out right ahead of him. This steer, again, he's sound, he's big-bodied, he's very, very practical. Again, just a little plain in his look, and we need to see him with more squareness and shape coming out of the backside of his shoulder whenever you go in and get up on top of him. The steer that we're going to round out our class with, this steer is very extended. He's got a lot of length of body. He's really extended up front as well. With that extra extension, probably needs to pair that with just a shot more muscle because he comes off as a bit harder ribbed and a bit flatter than the rest of them that we've got in here. I think we just need to stouten him up with a little more horsepower to work him up the line. Congratulations, another nice class of them. Those exhibitors did an awesome job showing.
Class 4, returning to the finals, Quinn Falwell from Boundary Beef and Maggie Olson from Frog Hollow. Receiving blue ribbons, Lucas Klein, Charlie Stalkup, and Trayton Kimball. Next into the ring will be Class 5 of our 4-H market show. Aubrey Niveton, Footloose 4-H, 1,290 pounds. Kelly Cordill, Frog Hollow, steer weighing 1,296. Ann Hedrick, Better Beef, steer weighing 1,300. Adriana Gonzalez, Footloose 4-H, steer weighing 1,310. Autumn Dixon, Blue Ribbon 4-H, steer weighing 1,313. And Gus Fighter, Garfield County Livestock, steer weighing 1,323.
This is a really good set of steers and a very good class top to bottom. All 6 of them, really pretty nice cattle that we've got out here. I really like our class winner. I like his look in combination with an awesome shape. He's very fresh coming out of the back of his shoulder. He's got a great turn from behind. That steer combines that with just a little more look and stoutness of structure than the one does coming right in behind him. I'd like to change him at his knee and in his front foot just a bit. We could lay him back there just ever so slightly, but for me, that one's look in combination with shape allows him to go ahead and lead us off. The one that's coming out here into this one, fundamentally great fat steer. Awesome rib, great bodied, definitely a steer that's got enough muscle. In comparison to the cattle that are sit on either side of him, he's probably not as impressive in his shape right in behind his shoulder. And of the top 3, he's probably the frailest one as well. And so if you could maybe make him just a little stouter in his bone work, maybe make him just a little square right in behind his shoulder, I think he probably pushes our class winner just a little bit harder than he already does, because that's still a very nice calf that for me I thought had a little more extension to him, and I thought he was a little more acceptable in his hind leg design in comparison to the one that's coming out here in 3. Now the one that's coming out here in 3, whenever you get up on top of these cattle or you get in and pass behind this lineup, he is very impressive in his muscle. He is bold backed. He is very, very stout out of his hip. He does not lack genuine dimension all the way through front to back. For me, I kind of got hung up on his structure just a little bit. Whenever we get him in motion, it's mainly his hip and his hind leg design. Really wants to duck his pins, get outside of himself, and jam his rear ankle down. If we can change him and give him a good hip and hind leg, then I think we can probably talk about getting him up a spot or 2 higher. The young man that we got coming out here next, that's a nice steer too. He's smooth made, he's big bodied. That's a steer that's just a good market steer, and just in terms of fundamentals and a real practical kind of a calf, if you had a pen full of them, you'd be certainly happy with them. He doesn't have as much spread right in behind his shoulder, a little bit plainer in terms of his design as well. Young lady's baldy steer, that's coming out next. Beautiful built, great in his design, dead level down his top line. He's great structured. Whenever you get in behind him, he just needs more muscle. And if he has that, then I think he can work up the line, because he is so awesome built from the side. We just need to see him a bit bolder and more opened up all the way through. Same thing with the young lady that we're going to round out our class with, a very deep-bodied steer that's appropriately finished, that just needs to accommodate that with just a shot more muscle and shape, because he gets a bit too flat from behind. Congratulations on a nice class.
Class 5 receiving purple ribbons and coming back to the finals, Autumn Dixon and Ann Hedrick. We'll point out that Ann Hedrick and her steer is one of the new programs that Lori instituted this year, that is the Ranch to Show program, in order to try to get more market exhibitors here. That is a Ranch to Show steer sponsored by 4W Ranch. They will both come back to the finals. Receiving blue ribbons, Kelly Cordill, Gus Fighter, Adriana Gonzalez, and Aubrey Knifton. Class 6, coming into the ring next, we have Natalie Heineman, West Plains Rangers, 1324. Landon Williams, Ritzville Livestock, 1325. Brooke Gassetti, Move It or Lose It, 1329. Judson Hall, Columbia County Corrals, 1334. And Larissa Lippert, Boundary Beef, 1343.
We got another good class with another really, really nice pair of steers that we've got up here on the top end. Some good give and take between them. The young lady's red steer is going to go ahead and lead us off. For me, that one I like just a little bit better at the ground. He's bigger footed. He's stouter in his bone work. You get right in behind him. That's the big square hip steer that we've got out here. It's got a really nice shape to him up top. And then whenever you get off to the side of him, I think his extra bone, his extra extension, his extra squareness out of his hip all aid to him being just a little nicer from a balance standpoint as well. Now the steer that's coming right in behind him, he's just a little more opened up through his chest floor, and I do like that about him. And he's a steer that's very bold bodied. He's the other muscular steer in here that whenever you get up on top of him and get in behind him, that steer's got a good shape and a good turn to him as well. For the kind of power and mass that he's got up high, he gets a little frailer in his bone work down low, and he's the smaller footed one of the pair that gets just a little lighter in his bone work, and he's not quite as square out of his hip whenever you study him in comparison to our class winner. So there's just a couple little things that sort that pair where he's running second to a pretty nice one, but that's a really good pair, and this young man does a real good job getting these calves shown. The one that's coming out here in 3, that's another one that's super striking and very attractive from the profile. If you're just judging him from the side, you got to give that one a look, and he's dang sure in contention because he's awesome down his top line, got a good hip and hind leg. He gets out and goes. I really like his structure to go along with that as well. He's actually got a pretty good shape right in behind his shoulder, but whenever you get right in behind him, he does fade just a bit too much to his hip, and he gets a little flatter right through the center and lower part of his quarter, and we need to open him up just a bit down low, but still a steer that's got a lot of quality to him, just ran out of horsepower in comparison to those ones up the line. We got a steer coming out here next, very extended, very long-bodied, needs just a shot more depth back through his rear rib and flank. He gets a little off in his top line, a bit too round out of his hip, and that throws him off in his balance from the side. The steer that we're going to round out our class with, that young lady's doing a great job with the big outline steer that I love his length and I love his extension whenever you get off to the side view profile. It's just whenever you get right in behind him or right up on top of him, he just needs a shot more muscle and shape, and he is ready to go today. He's had enough of the show, and he's ready to get back to the barn, but you've done a good job hanging with him and showing him the whole time. You've done a great job presenting him. Good job. Congratulations on another nice class.
From Class 6 of our 4-H Market Show, returning to the finals, Brooke Gassetti from Move It or Lose It and Judson Hall, Columbia County. Receiving blue ribbons, Landon Williams, Larissa Lippert, and Natalie Heineman. Class 7, entering the ring, we have Natalie Gutierrez, Footloose, steer wing 1363. Kale Cordill, Frog Hollow, 1366. Julian Gonzalez, Footloose, 1369. Quinn Falwell, Boundary Beef, 1370. Piper Price, Buckles and Bling, 1379. And Kennedy Cannon, Country Kids 4-H Pomeroy, 1392.
top to bottom, the depth, the quality of this class is really impressive. I really like the pair of steers that we're going to land on that come out in 1 and 2. Very similar, and honestly, they're probably more alike than they are different. I think they're kind of two peas in a pod whenever you talk about rib and body type and frame size and muscularity and dimension. And really, whenever you get up on top of them, I think there's some subtle differences, but they're both muscular cattle that are appropriately finished. I still think the one that wins, though, whenever you step off and study him, he's a little more attractive up front. He's a little square out of his hip. I think he's just a shade better in the way that he sits down in his hock and his rear ankle. And then I think probably the biggest difference whenever you go in and get your hands on him, our class winner is the most impressive in his freshness and squareness right out of the backside of his shoulder in comparison to the one that's coming in behind him. So even though I think those two steers are again, they're more alike than they are different, there's some subtle advantages of our class winner that allows him to go ahead and get the nod. The one that's coming out here into another one, I love this type and kind. A moderate, big-bodied, practical, easy feeding fat steer that's got a big hip in him. Whenever you get in behind him, he's not quite as impressive. Whenever you go in and get your hands on him right in behind his shoulder, he wants to fade right there, and he's just not quite as bold right there. And then whenever you get him in motion, that steer he wants to kick outside of himself and get just a bit more rigid in his rear ankle in comparison to our class winner. So again, just some subtle differences that sort them, but a pair of really, really nice steers. The white steer that's coming out here next, this is a nice steer. His parts and pieces are good. He's good in his look from the side. That steer's a high-quality kind of a calf that's got the right kind of rib and body type. Maybe for me, he's just a little stale. He's a little staler in terms of his hair. He's a little staler in terms of his presentation. That just goes along with his shape. Whenever you get up on top of him, he doesn't have the same kind of freshness, the same kind of boldness down his back, the same kind of stoutness and pop out of his hip. I would have liked to have seen that steer maybe 60 days ago and hoping that he would have been just a little bit fresher than he is today, because I think that's a quality calf that's maybe just a little past 12 o'clock. Here's a steer coming out next that's standing still. I like his moderation. I like his body type. He's actually got a very nice shape coming right out of the backside of his shoulder. For me, we need to change him up at the ground. We need to smooth him up in his shoulder, see him just a little bit better in his front end structure, change his rear foot shape, and then whenever he gets in motion, give him a little more coordination off of his rear skeleton. Here's a steer that's opened up. He's big-bodied. He's very, very stout. Again, another one that we just need to change from a structure standpoint. He's probably the one that's the most opened up in his shoulder and probably the coarsest one in terms of his front end build. And again, change him in the way that he gets out of his hip and his hind leg. Steer that we're going to round out with, this young man does a killer job showing, and he's got a long neck, good-looking steer that maybe for me just comes off just a little hard-bodied, a little less practical, a little harder feeding looking. Even though I love him up front, that is the shallowest bodied, the tightest hearted steer that we've got in here that just needs a bit more dimension and just a little more practical, easy feeding looks to go ahead and work up the line. But he did a great job with him. That's a really nice set of steers. Congratulations to all of them on a nice job.
Class 7 returning to the finals, Cale Cordill and Quinn Falwell. Receiving blue ribbons, Natalie Gutierrez, Piper Price, Kennedy Cannon, and Julian Gonzalez. I do want to point out that Piper Price's steer is another one that was part of that Ranch to Show program. The sponsor on that one was Dixon Land and Livestock. We will see those cattle back in the ring a little later today. Class 8. Coming into the ring, we have Aubrey DeGon, Liberty Knights, steer weighing 1409. Blake Lindgren, Garfield County Livestock, 1420. Lila Blickenstaff, Blue Ribbon 4-H, 1486. Larissa Lippert, Boundary Beef, 1492. And Hallie Kerr, St. John Endicott, 1496.
Got another really competitive class as we're creeping up into these heavier weight classes, and again, very competitive up here on the top end. Pair of black steers that are going out in 1 and 2. Again, some subtle differences between them. I really like the look and design of our class winner. I think he's just a little fresher, a little neater than the one that's coming right in behind him. That steer's better in his chest, he's better in his neck set, and he's very impressive in his shape up top, and I like the design of his hip and his hind leg just a bit better than the one that's coming in behind him as well. The one that's coming out here in 2, moderate, big-bodied, extra stout in terms of his bone work and his feature. For me, that steer's maybe getting just a little more mature, a little deeper up through his chest floor, a little plainer there up about his head and the crest of his neck. He doesn't have the same kind of shape and expression that we see in that one that goes out right ahead of him, but I still think there's more bone and more substance and just more width and mass and body in him than the one that's coming right out and behind him. Young lady with the yellow steer that's coming out here next has a really neat look to him from the side. That's a big outlined and long-bodied steer that's very extended up through his front end, dead level down his top line. Honestly, probably if you're just judging him from the side, you might swap 2 and 3. Of the initial trio, though, he does get the frailest in his bone work, and you get right in behind him, he does get just a little flatter right through the center and lower part of his hip, and we need to stouten him up from about his mid-portion down to make him more competitive here in this class. But you've done a nice job with him. That's a really good-looking and high-quality steer. The red baldy calf that's coming next, more moderate. He's bigger-bodied. Man, he's got an easy feed and really good fat steer look about him, probably to the point where he gets just a little plain in his look from the side. That steer get up on top of him. He's just a bit nondescript and plain in his shape as well. We need to see him with just a bit more look and a little more shape to go along with it. Same thing with the young lady steer that we're going to round out our class with. Another big outline steer that's big-bodied. I appreciate just his lateness of maturity to get to a big heavy weight and still maintain his composition good enough. He just needs a shade more muscle down his top, especially from behind. That steer gets a little flat out of his hip. Congratulations on a nice class.
Class 8 of our 4-H market beef, returning to finals with purple ribbons, Lila Blickenstaff and Larissa Lippert. Receiving blue ribbons, Aubrey Dagon, Blake Lindgren, and Hallie Kerr. We're going to welcome into the ring now our 9th and final class of 4-H market animals. Chloe Waisler with a Farm Heaven with a steer weighing 1606, and Charlie Casey, Farm Heaven, steer weighing 1627.
Couple big husky boys around us out here in our market steer show. I think both these steers are just a shade over 1,600. But what's impressive is they both fit their weight. They're both big outline cattle that have the kind of frame, that have the kind of extension to handle it. They both back it up with enough muscle to stay good in their composition. So really, I'm okay with their weight because they fit it very, very nicely. The steer that's going to go ahead and start us off, that steer's just a little neater in his look from the side. He's better up front. He hooks up stronger behind his shoulder. He lays just a little neater in his tail head whenever we get these cattle in motion. He's also just a little freer in the way that he gets out of his hip and his hind leg. His length of stride is more consistent than the one that comes right in behind him. And of the pair, I think they're both very, very muscular cattle, but our class winner even hooks up just a little bolder behind his shoulder than the one that's coming right in behind him. The one that's coming in behind him, that's a good steer too. He's big-footed. He's stout in his bone work. That's a big extended steer who I love his length of body. He's got just a little extra chest to him. He doesn't hook up quite as good in his top line. He wants to get just a bit coarse in his tail head. You set those two cattle in motion. He comes up just a bit short and rigid in his stride from behind, so we could change him there to go ahead and flop that pair. But good pair of them there. Congratulations to both those girls on a nice job.
Class 9, our final class of 4-H market beef, both returning to the finals, Charlie Casey and Chloe Weisler. It is 5:26, and we were announcing at 5:30 that we would start with the FFA market finals. So here in just a couple minutes, we're going to bring in the class winners from the FFA market classes earlier today, followed by the second place steers from those same classes.